We are right at the top of Daf Mem Amud Aleph. At the end of yesterday, we were learning about what's considered a beged and whether or not shiroyin and other fabrics require tzitzis. So Zok Tehillah Gemara, Tanu Rabbanan, Sadin b'tzitzis. What happens if you have a linen beged? Do they need to have tzitzis? Because it's going to involve klayim. Beishamai poitrin. Beishamai holds that a beged of linen is potter from klayim. Rashi tells us because Beishamai doesn't darshan smuchim, and therefore he doesn't say that the mitzvah of tzitzis will be doich chedish of klayim. We still mechayiv, but we still holds it's chayiv because he is darshan smuchin. It says lasil b'shatnis followed by gidilim tasalacha.
Is it just in this case he doesn't darshan it, or he doesn't darshan it at all? Ever.
I'm not sure, but he said the loy dashin and smuchin. The problem is the way Rashi learns. Tosfos actually asks a kasha because he brings from a Gemara that says even if you're not going to darshan smuchin everywhere else, but for sure in Sefer Dvarim we are going to darshan smuchin. So Tosfos asks Rashi because of the minim bereish vamas filu man the loy darish smuchin ba'alma b'mishatar darish. So Tosfos does not like Rashi's pshat. So what Rashi says is since he doesn't darshan smuchin, so therefore it's going to be osur. It's really osur to wear. It's osur to wear. Tosfos is an alternative pshat. Let me see what Tosfos says. Pirish ben Tam the midaraisa beishami nami chiyuva mechayev. So Tosfos learns, in fact, that Avada Beishamai darshan smuchin, and Avada Beishamai holds that there won't be an iser of shatness. There's a reason, the Rabbanan, why he's goyzer and he says you shouldn't use tzitzis of tchelas in a beged of sadin. So really, he does darshan smuchin. So according to Rashi, it seems like the loy dashin smuchin at all.
Right. The smuchin is everywhere.
And we darshan it all over the place.
Yeah.
So Rashi seems to say that Beishamai does not darshan smuchim, and midaraisa there's no din tzitzis, and Beishamai holds it's only midrabanan. At the end of the day, right before we even get off the ground, b'halacha it's given Basil. We pass it anyway like Basil, so we will darshan smuchim. So it won't have another impact halacha that we're aware of. Omar Beliezer bar Tzadok. I don't understand. Anyone who would wear tchelas, would wear tzitzis in Yerushalayim, we consider him from a person who stands out. Any element of people mitames kolaron, he will amaze, he will shock anyone who sees him, because sha'omer klayim hu lovush. People think that this person is wearing klayim. So who is this kasha on? So Rashi in his first pshat says this kasha is ad beis Hillel polag Rabbi Eliezer. Rabbi Eliezer is arguing with Hillel. How could you say that you're supposed to wear a beged of pishton with tzitzis in Yerushalayim? It was considered bin hamatami, and clearly people didn't do that. Rashi actually has a second shot that learns that he's acting on Beishamai, and he's asking. Beishamai says Sadin is potter b'tzitzis, so you see there's mamish and iser. It seems like from Beishamai that it's mamish also to wear tzitzis, but if you look at the Maaseh in Yerushalayim, it was only min hamatamiin, but it's not an iser. As Rashi points out in the second lotion, Lish nachrina belezad Beishamai polig the Omri Sadin potter. Beishamai said that Sadin is potter. Almod loyrami tziti irami tziti savaklayim. It's mamish adaraisa. V'aloy amatel tema hu ikavel yisura leka. So again, according to this second shot in Tosfos, it's clear that Beis Shammai is saying midaraisa you're not mechuyev, which wouldn't be consistent with Tosfos' shot. Rabbi Tam says that just midirabanan, so then there wouldn't be a question, there wouldn't be a disagreement from Eliezer, so the kasha would have to be on Beis Hill. Or it's not a kasha on Beis Hill, it's Rabbi Eliezer disagreeing with Beis Hill. So Zogt Gemara, Amar Rebbe Imkain Lama Asura. So why did they asur it? Sai, according to Beis Shammai, why would they have asured it? Why does Beis Shammai hold it's also lechatchila? And according to Beis Hill, where you're allowed to, and it's a mitzvah to wear tzitzis, even though it's klayim, why in Yerushalayim didn't they? So Gemara Levisha ein bikiyin, because they're not bikiyin. What does it mean Levisha ein bikiyin? So Rashi says Levisha ein bikiyin means Levisha ein bikiyin. Zok Rashi. I don't know why I can't find it.
6 lines up from the skin.
They don't understand the dash and smuchim, the klayim betzitzis mutter. And since they don't dash and smuchim, because they're not learned, so they'll think that someone is violating the mitzvah of klayim. And therefore, so that's why they. So the question is, I don't understand something. Vibal, someone's going to look at it and think that it's klayim. So the Rabbanan are going to say, don't do a mitzvah. They're going to be oiker dovim in the Torah. Zokt Rashi, yes, you find that because you find that b'shuv al tasa. Sometimes Chazal will tell you don't do a mitzvah because of it could lead to problems. So there they are, and Rashi is because that's not called ein ze oiker dovim in the Torah. The memela miyaker, it's being me'aker memela, but people aren't biyadayim violating a mitzvah deraisa. V'lo iu aker lo biyadayim.
They're not saying don't wear tzitzis. They're saying don't wear the beged. Don't wear a linen beged.
Correct. So they're not mamish being oikert. Okay. And if you had a beged like that, don't put tzitzis on it. Right. Zog to Gemara weiter. Omer le Rava bar Chana le Rabba. Now I want to make sure that I'm learning correctly. I don't want to learn like the first lashon. I want to learn like the second lashon. 1 second. Lefish ein bnei adam bekiyin the klayim betzitzis muter. Right. V'asel lemishur klayim shaloi b'makam mitzvah. We're going to learn it like Rashi second shot. So for Gemara, I don't understand. Why Omer le Rava bar Rab Chana le Rava? I don't understand. That's a reason to be mevatel the whole mitzvah of tzitzis. V'lirmu beyasora. Get a bezna of 10 people that makes a koil gadol. Everybody knows that whenever a koil gets put out, everyone reads it, everyone listens to it, and it's very effective, right? So v'lirmu beyasora v'nafki l'shuka. Let them go out and make an announcement. Umafarsima l'milsa. Rashi says, what should they be mefarsim? The klayim b'tzitzis muter. Tell everybody. Klayim b'tzitzis muter. Educate the masses. Don't throw out the baby with the bathwater and say don't do the mitzvah of tzitzis with a beged pishtim. Why don't they just educate the masses? Zok Tamar, are you kidding? Kol shekain the masamu ilun. It's going to make it even worse. Why? The Amri Anoshim Agunim Ke'elu Loishin Klayim. What they're going to see all the Gedolei Ador saying you're allowed to wear Klayim, B'tzitzis. They're all going to say, Fuss, and Moshe wears Klayim, then for sure I'm allowed to wear Klayim.
There's no dialogue.
Huh?
They can't allow to talk and explain.
But what the Gemara is saying is just like today, everyone extracts from the Koil Koirei what they want and how they understand it, and then there becomes a whole tumult and the door. They're the ones who are violating Klayim. Okay, Frank Gemara, I don't understand. What is kasha? V'lid yishem pirka. Let them explain it. Right? That's your question. Let them explain it. Zok to Gemara, no. There's another problem here. Gzeira mishum kala ilon. We're going to abandon the problem that people are going to think you can wear tzitzis. Let's say they succeed. They can succeed in teaching the masses that for tzitzis you're allowed to have klayim. But the problem is, what if the tchelas that they use is not real tchelas? It's kala ilan. So they're not being mekayim the mitzvah. If they're not being Mekayim the mitzvah, but they are using tefillah, they are using tzitzis that are shatnez, that's when you have a problem. Zok Rashi, Gzeir Mishum Kal Ilan, Tzevahu, it's a dye, Shedoimer L'Tchelas, the Isharis Shel Tchelas, Besadin, if they're going to allow you to use the woolen Tchelas threads in a linen beged, Osi Lemirmi Tzemar Tzavua Bekala Ilan. People might not use Tchelas, but they might use Kala Ilan, V'ava Klaim Shaloi B'Makam Mitzvah. That's going to be Klaim Shaloi B'Makam Mitzvah. Frag the Gemara.
Tell me, the mitzvah is the tchelas part of it, or is it
But tchelas, in order to put on tzitzis, you have to have two tchelas strings. Tchelas is always wool. So if you
before that, if you don't do tchelas, it's also okay.
Oh, very good. So frag the Gemara. V'lo yehi ela lavan. Even if they were white, let's say they were not tchelas. Let's say they were white. Didn't we say that if you don't have blue, you could put it in white, which is what we do? Zokt Rashi v'kaparach ma ichpas lon irami kala ilon. Why is it such a problem? Lo yehei hai kala ilon ela lavan ba'alma. Even if it's like white, klomer tzemer lavan harmer la'il ein lo tchelas mata lavan. Right? That's not this kasha. So why is there a problem of kala ilon? And for the Gemara, kivan de efsher b'minan. When do we say that asay doichalois aseh? You could use klein betzitzis. That's if you don't have an option. But if you have an option, avada, you're not allowed to violate the lois aseh. So if you need to put tchelas in, then you don't have an option. You have to use woolen threads. But once you don't have tchelas, then you're not allowed to use any more wool threads. Use linen threads, and then it won't be shatnez. Kiven de efsher b'minan lohi k'derei shlokish tomer shlokish kol mokem shatan moitz aseh v'lois aseh, and im ata yochol l'kayim shneim, if you could be mekayim the aseh without violating the lois aseh, mutav, it's good. V'imlav, only if there's no possible way to be mekayim the aseh without violating the lois aseh, then and only then yovay aseh v'yitches lois aseh. Okay, let's see Rashi. Kivan de efsher b'minan, the l'shem lovan, efsher losses chutei pishton. Just for the lovan, you could use chutei pishton. You didn't need to use wool. Therefore, lo'iraminan lovan de tzemer b'sadin. You're not allowed to use woolen white threads in a sadin. You should have to make it out of pishton. K'di Rish Lakish, like Rish Lakish, Tarish, kloimar. What does Rish Lakish say? I'm just going to look at Aleph in the Bach. Lovan Gomer loy mati latilon l'shum tzitzis mishum davi klein b'tzitzis. Why? Hoyel v'efsher latilon b'minoi, because he could have used tzitzis made out of pishton. Avol tchelas the tzemer, but tchelas the efsher. So this is where the gears is a little rough. So let's look at the test. The efsher besadin b'minoi, it will be impossible to have tchelas made out of sadin, because the whole tchelas tzemerhu, because tchelas by definition is wool. Therefore, I'm looking at the base in the Bach, hava shori raminon ilav mishum gzeir de kala ilon. So then it would be mutter if not because of the gzeir of kala ilon. If you could be mekayim eshneim mutav kagoyin lovan de pishton besadin. If you
Why is this all included in the Lidrash B'Pirka? Don't listen to half the drashim.
People don't listen too good, but the Gemara is gonna follow through and wrestle to the ground and ask a little bit of your kasha. Kan love the vision besaden mekayim asay the tzitzis v'yitchalat the klayim. Freik the Gemara, so we can deal with kala ilan too. V'livdeke, exactly Moti's question. So why don't they check? Why don't they create a regime that audits? It's like a quality control regime. It's like the Ministry of Weights and Measures, where they go around and they measure people's weights to make sure that people are dealing honestly, right? If you ever pump gas, right on the gas pump. There's a sticker and it says when it was last inspected. They inspected to make sure that when the tank says it's giving you a liter of gas, it's giving you a liter of gas. That actually has to be tested and verified. So why don't they have a testing agency to make sure that all blue that's used is kala ilan, believe the kua, and then weiter there's no problem again. So why won't they wear tzitzis on the beged of Sadin? So let's see Rashi what it means. Believe the K, niskon rabbanon, let rabbanon be misakin, shelo yikach odom tchelas ela imkein bodka. What they should do is they should be misakin that you cannot use tchelas unless you're boidik. So what I touched it as they should set up a inspection agency. That is the first lashon in Rashi. But I want to learn like the second lashon in Rashi. So if you can see, the first lashon in Rashi is the livdek lechol yoshid ben tzitzis hayoshid moichet cheles the leila hava kalilan. Do inspections on the vendors. But that's not how Rashi learns in the second lashon. The second lashon Rashi learns niskin rabbanon shelo yikach odom tcheles elam kebodka. You yourself, whenever you buy tcheles, you yourself should have to do a test. There's actually a way to test. So teach everybody how to test. Shemevi gila vishavlilta. I don't know exactly what that means, but we're going to learn the Gemara soon. There was actually a way where you can test to see if it's kala ilan or not. So we're back to square one. Why in Yerushalayim was it minamatmian if somebody wore tzitzis b'sadin? If it's a mitzvah, there should be a say doichaloisha. Ella, you know what it is? Gzer mishum te'ima. Now, there's the two lashonos of Rashi hinge around whether you gers Ella. Our Gemara is gers Ella. Ella gzer mishum te'ima, meaning te'ima is not supporting the previous chash of kala ilan. We're completely aborting the problem of kala ilan. And now we have a whole new reason why it is that you shouldn't use tcheles on the beged of Sadin. It's because of te'ima. What does te'ima mean? We're afraid that you're going to use tcheles, dye, that's not done l'shem tzitzis. Ela mishum te'ima, zok Rashi, pa'amim sheyimkaru l'tcheles shel nisayon, the people who do the dyeing, everyone does dyeing eventually, but when the people who did the dyeing, when they were testing out their dye, they ran a test run. They used a test coupon. Now that test coupon wasn't dyed l'shem mitzvah tzitzis, it was dyed just as a test coupon. What are you going to do if you use that test coupon, or if you use the dye, the leftover dye from a test? They might sell you tchelas that's real tchelas, but it wasn't tchelas that was done l'shma. You can't test this because this is real tchelas. It's just done for a test coupon. Because it would be shaloi l'shma. So that is a problem. There's that. There's others who learn it's because even the extra dye that you tested in the test pot, you'll use that dye in other batches. So that's the problem. The problem is it's possible that the tchelas that you're using is not kosher for tzitzis. Fragt Gemara, v'lichtava adiski. Write on the diski. What is a diski? Zokt Rashi, v'nichtava adiski, l'shloyach b'oishen ha'makoymois, shes choivin b'hem tchelas. Send a letter to all the vendors that are in the dyeing business, where all of the dyeing companies work. It's not a good word, a dyeing company. It's a vibrant company that does dyeing, right? Ben Chelas have a yoiden. You should know shehateima psula. Anything that's a test coupon you cannot sell, you cannot use as proper tchelas. If all of the professionals that manufacture these goods, if they're aware they can't use that, then nismachalen, you could rely on them. They're trustworthy. So tell the common public that's not relevant. Send out a letter specifically, educate all of the vendors that they cannot use this tchelas to make tzitzis with. Why is Gemara taking a different approach? Before we said darshan in all the public shur and put out a kol kaira. Now they're saying no. Target your education campaign on the specific set of vendors. Why? A lot of this stuff happens not by the drasha. So if the Rav makes a big drasha barabim, these people aren't coming. Right? It's like whenever you go to a shmooze and they talk about sneeze, and they talk about shnahara, and they talk about this, the people who are supposed to listen to it don't come to the speech. Right? All the people who they want to be ma'or generally are not coming to the speech in the first place.
But the thing when it comes to a filter on your phone, the internet,
Right.
The filter is the tag things.
Right. All the people with flip phones are coming. What's a browser, right? So you have to send information directly to the vendors. Zokt Gemara, Adiski, like him v'lismoich. Tell me something. You're actually going to rely on a directive sent out? Who's going to listen? That's what the Mati Tainu is ultimately. At the end of the day, no one's listening. So since no one's listening, we have a problem that a lot of the tchelas might not be legit tchelas. Therefore, since there's a chashash on all tchelas, that maybe it's not legit, maybe it was done shaloi lishma and it's not kosher for tzitzis, don't use it on the beged of pishtan. What's that? That's right. Omar Rava, Zok Treva, I don't understand. Are you telling me that nobody listens to the shliach that comes to give them information? You're talking about a mitzvah tzitzis, about a lav of shadness. Chometz bepesach. Don't they listen to the shluchim as to when Rosh Chodesh was? Sheshanaymo, they listen to the shluchim. Or Yom Kippurim, to know what day is Yom Kippurim. How do we know that? Because there's a directive sent out through the same email system, through the same notification system. So Avada, everyone listens to it. So why would you say they wouldn't? If you could rely on it for a chiv chorus, you surely should be able to rely on it for a chiv lav. Surely we could rely on it. So we're back to square one. Why aren't people wearing tzitzis in Yerushalayim on the beged of Sadin? Ela Amarava, I'm going to tell you the real reason why in Yerushalayim they didn't wear tzitzis b'Sadin. Ha milsa Amri, I said this, and the Itmar b'Marava mishum Reb Zera Kavasi, and the Olam in Marava told me that Rabbi Zera holds like me as well. And the reason is Shema Yikra Sadinoi b'Soich Gimel v'Yitfarenu. Imagine if within 3 finger widths of the edge of your beged, which is the zone in which you can place your tzitzis, right? You can't drill a hole in the middle of your tzitzis and put the string through. You have to put them through the corner of your beged within 3 finger widths of the corner. So that's within 2 or 3 inches of the corner. What if your beged tears within those 3 inches, right? And now you sew it up. So when you sew it up, so take a brand new beged, it tore there, and you sewed it up. But when you sewed it up, there's extra thread hanging out from the stitches that you did to sew it up. You might say, hey, I have these strings hanging here anyway, I might as well use them as tzitzis. I'll just add 2 of tchelas to it, and I'll be in business. So the reason why there's a problem is because if you put 2 threads of tchelas, which are wool, through a hole, when you're also having the other 2 are posel, because they're tasav v'loy min ha'osli, they're threads that are left over from the point where you did stitching, that's going to be posel.
So, why is dafka by linen garment? Why would you have a thread hanging by a wool garment?
You might, but there won't be a problem of shatnez. Our problem is that when you put the tchelas in, now it makes it into shatnez. The tchelas with the linen garment, the shatnez. If those 2 threads would be good, so then the tchelas belongs there because it's a mitzvah. The mitzvah of tzitzis is doiche kalayim. But if you're not being mekayim the mitzvah, then you got a problem.
Why aren't you mekayim the mitzvah with
because the two white threads don't count. So again, this is going to be totally in a machlokes that we had earlier. Whether or not, if you only have two and not the other two, we had a machlokes Rabbi and the Chachamim. Rabbi said that two are ma'ak of each other, and the Chachamim said they're not ma'ak of each other. But Rashi learns regardless, you need to have all four, right? So according to Rashi Menachos, you need to have all four threads. You could replace two blues with two whites, but you have to have four threads. Here you only have two threads.
You have the same thing by wool blanket.
Right, but it's not shatnez. It would be possible, but it won't be shatnez at least. The problem is that it's shatnez. We're not making a big deal. Don't put tzitzis on because you might not be b'kayim the mitzvah. That's not the problem. Don't put tzitzis on because if you're not b'kayim the mitzvah, it'll be shatnez. So Zog to Gemara, Shema Yikra Sadin, Koidim Lachein, before you are ready to place your tzitzis, Besoich Gimel Etzbois L'sfas HaKnaf, Da'inu Makam HaTzitzis. And then what's going to happen is V'yitferenu, you're going to sew them up, Bechutei Pishton, V'yaniach Seif HaChut Natluim Sham, and you'll leave the ends of the threads hanging there, and you'll say, hey, let's make them into tzitzis. V'yachach Yitin Ba, Shnei Chutei Tchelas, V'yitzaref Oisem Shnayim Shalav Animan. V'atayr Amar Tasa V'loy Min Asri V'nimtzas Tzitzis Psula V'havaklayim Shaloi B'maka Mitzvah. Tasa V'loy Min Asri. The apostle Hainu Sha'oisem Etchila Shaloi L'Shem Tzitzis, who was originally stitched, not L'Shem Tzitzis, just to stitch the beged. V'loy Nasak Mitzvasoi V'achagach Tiknu. Then you were masaking it. Karin Bay V'loy Min Asri V'nimt Tzitzis is Psula. This is how Rashi learns. So Rashi learns we have a problem of Tasa V'loy Min Asri. Zog to Gemara. Where do you see that Rabbi Zera held similar to Rava? Because Shara Rabbi Zera Lisadine. Rabbi Zera had a beged of Sadin and he took the tzitzis out. It must be because of Rava's reasoning. The Rashash asks, there's other options that we've had in the Gemara, and we're going to have another option in a moment. How do you know that the only reason is because of what Rava did? Rav Zera, and I'm making a distinction between Rabbi Zera and Rav Zera. Rav Zera Omar Gzera Nami Mishum Ksus Laila. You know what the problem is? A Ksus Laila is potter from tefillin, from tzitzis. And there's a shaila actually in the Rishonim, if that means pajamas, even if you wore it by day, don't need tzitzis. But if you wore a regular beged at night, you do need to have tzitzis. So is it a din in the style beged? Or is it a din in when you're wearing it? Any beged that you wear by day, you mechuyev in tzitzis. And any beged that you're wearing at night, you don't need tzitzis. Regardless of how you learn, the problem here is we're worried that you'll put tzitzis on either a ksus laila, which will be shamis, or what you will do is you will wear a beged at night when it's not mechuyev in tzitzis, and it'll have these klayim, and that's why Rav Zera said better don't put tzitzis on it at all. Zok Rashi, Rav Zera Amar Gzera Mishum Ksus Laila, Shema Yiskasa Boy Belayla, the potter mitzitzis. Shenemar Isamoi, so you have to be able to see it. Uzachayt and Prat L'Chsus Loila, the Nims and the Henemiklayim, Shaloi B'Shas Mitzvah. Okay, Gavaldik. Now this is how Rashi learns. Tosfos has a very big problem with Rashi, and the most obvious problem is, why is this a situation of Tasa V'loy Min Asri? You had a completed beged, you sewed it up, and there's strings hanging. You know what the problem really is? It's not Lishma. The strings were put there to stitch up the beged. Then as an afterthought, okay, let's leave them there for tzitzis. So why is Rashi making a big deal of this Tasa V'loy Min Asri? It's not Tasa V'loy Min Asri. The beged was there completely, right? And then you put strings on. You put the strings on for the wrong purpose. And now you want to say, I'm purposing it for tzitzis. So Frek Tosfos, Pirish B'Kuntris B'Soich Sholosh Neklaf. What happened was the tear was within 3 finger breadths of the edge of the beged. Uchashit Ferenu B'Chutei Pishton Yaniach Soif Achut and Tluyin Shom L'Tzitzis Vav L'Tasa V'loy Min Asri. Frek Tosfos Miu Hava Leila Minkit Mishum Dabi'inan Tfiyah Eitliya Lishma. That's the shaila. Aval Tasa V'loy Min Asri Leika. Lefi Masha Farish Lakamon Gabe Osam and Akoitzim and Agredim. It's not Tasa V'loy Min Asri. Frek Tosfos. So Tosfos has a bunch of different kashas, and the Tosfos has a little bit of a different shot. Kach tzorch lefarish, you know what Torch Shalosh means? Hanu shenikra haknaf. It's not shot there was a tear in the edge of the beged. The whole edge of the beged tore. The whole edge of the beged, so a 4-inch by 4-inch square, was torn off of the beged, and it was hanging by merely a little piece of fabric that was 3 fingers wide. And I'm sorry, there wasn't even 3. There wasn't even 3 fingers off, meaning it's severed from the beged. If it's severed from the beged, v'hava kilu nifsak lagamri. So now you have tzitzis on the beged, but you don't have a beged anymore. Now when you sew it back, the tzitzis were on it already. That's tasav v'loi menasi. So Tosfos learns that the whole corner of the beged got torn off. And that's what we're worried about. We're worried about if you have a beged shal pishton, if a corner gets torn off and you sew it back on, it'll be tasav v'loi menasi, and therefore the tzitzis, you're not being kind of mitzvah of tzitzis, and if there's tchelis there, there's wool threads there, it will be klayim. Okay, gavaltik. V'yom Rava, Hamil Amri, I said this, halakha, v'yitim b'marava mishmei de Reb Zeira kavasi. And another halacha that I said, where I was mechaven to Reb Zeira, and that is as follows. He shall beged. You have a beautiful beged made out of fabric, made out of wool, let's say. But uknafei shalor, the 4 corners were not fabric. The 4 corners where you would place the tzitzis was made out of leather. So the halacha is chayeves, yichayev, because you look at the ikra beged. What about he shall or uknafei shall beged? What if you had a full leather beged, but the corners were made out of fabric? Tura, my timer ikra beged ba'inan. You focus on what the beged's made out of, not the edges.
Muzzle. Have leather
Well, that he could become a biker because they have like leather fringes. Yeah. Sagt Gemara of Rav Achai Ozel Basar Knaf. He goes, no, you follow the Knaf. So he does exactly the opposite. Amar Rava, Amar Rav Schoira, Amar Rav Huna. Hittel lebala sholosh v'shlim al arba. What if you had a beged that only had 3 corners, and you put tzitzis in the 3 corners? The beged was not yet mechuyev in tzitzis. Then you put a 4th corner on. That's going to be psula mishum tasav v'loi menasi. See, that's psula mishum tasav v'loi menasi. It was put in l'shma, but when it was put in, it wasn't mechuyev yet. It became mechuyev in tzitzis after you put the tzitzis on. Meisvei. Chasidim arishonim kivin she'argu ba gimel. Let's say they were going to be making a beged that's 2 feet by 2 feet. But once they're up to 2 feet by 3 fingers, meaning they should have a strip, which is the minimum sized beged, they will put tchelis in. Now the problem is, by the time they finish the beged, those two of the tzitzis are not at the edge of the beged, they're in the middle of the beged, because they put them in too prematurely. So the problem is, how can they do that? Zakta Gemara, Ema kivin shapatzu ba'gimel or batzu ba'gimel, depending on your gesa, hayu matin l'tcheles. It means once they were within 3 finger breadths of the end of the beged, so then they're within the zone that they could place the tzitzis. That's when they did it. Is there really a concern, this whole concept of tasav v'lo menasi? The Amar Reb Zeira said, "Hitel lemutelas." What if you had a pair of tzitzis, and the tzitzis were getting worn out? You wanted to replace them with fresh strings. So you figure what you'll do is, you're not going to take out the old strings first. You'll put on new strings, and then when you finish putting on the new strings, then you'll cut off the old strings. So what happened is you put 3 strings on, your strings are nothing yet, right? When you put the 4th string on, now you're making you're igniting, you're awakening the earlier 3. That should be tasav v'loi menasi. Reb Zeira said it, hittel l'mutelas is ksheira. How could hittel l'mutelas be ksheira if in fact it should have a problem of tasa v'loi menasi? Amar Rava, Zokt Rava, what are you talking about? How could that be tasav v'loi menasi? Hashta bebal toisef koi. If you add more tzitzis onto a beged that already has tzitzis, you're over bal toisef. if you're over an Aveira with this Netilas tzitzis, or Atolas tzitzis, Maisa lo have. It can't be a Maisa. What's the connection? So Rashi says, Omar Rava, L'olam shaloi l'tzorech min ha'asoi karina bei. If it's takas shaloi l'tzorech, I agree with you, it's takas v'loi min ha'asoi. But for haka, l'hachi michshura b'basroi, you know why the second set of tzitzis are kosher? The koy b'val toisiv ki avdinu. When you're doing it, one by one, you over b'val toisiv, and therefore v'loi have a maisa, it's not a maisa. The chivan the over al divrei Torah, since when you're doing this, you're being over in divrei Torah, it's not called a maisa, lo mikri maisa. So therefore, when do we consider it that you're making the new tzitzis? Hilachi pasuk lekamoi hi havi asiyos in the basroi. When are the second set of tzitzis activated? When do we register the asiyah as having occurred? When you cut the first ones off. There, it's not mina asi. Al v'shaloi l'tzorech the balas gimel she'enoi over alein have a maisa lekruye tzitzis hayasuya b'psul. But if you did it shaloi l'tzorech, for instance, there was only 3 corners, that's where you have a problem of tasa v'lo min ha'asi, because you put on the 3 corners when they weren't needed, they weren't a mitzvah. The ika kashagaymer tasa v'lo min ha'asi, and therefore when you finish it, it's tasa v'lo min ha'asi. Now the achronim ask, I don't get it. What's the connection? Just because you're over Baal Tosef, how does that make it that it's not a maisa? I don't know. But
Why are you over about Tosef without a maisa?
No, since when you put on an extra set of tzitzis, you're over Baal Tosef, we automatically don't consider that as it's tasa v'lo min ha'asi. So therefore, until you take off the old strings, we don't register your maisa putting tzitzis on, because it was Baal Tosef until now. So Baal Tosef makes it that it's not tasa v'lo min ha'asi. Matska flora papa. You're assuming that this fellow was over Baal Tosef. Mimai de gaver l'suvika mechaven, dilma levetulika mechaven, uBaal Tosef leka ma'isika. How do you know to read this guy's mind? Who said that he was putting it l'shem tzitzis? Maybe he was just putting it l'shem strings, or because he wanted to be mevatel the other strings. So therefore, you don't have any taina, and this tzirik shver, you see from the fact that if you're matal tzitzis that already had tzitzis, you see that there's no problem of tasa v'lo min ha'asi. So we're remaining with the kasha, because it seems like we can bring a raya from there that there's no problem of tasa v'lo min ha'asi. Zog to Gemara weiter. Amar Abzeir, Amar Masna, Amar Shmuel, Tchelas ein ba mishum klayim, va'afilu betalis petura. It's a little bit of a new sugya, so we probably should stop here. So we'll stop. This is a little bit of a new sugya. Okay, so we'll stop here. So at the end of the day, we're blibing shver with Akasha. How could you say that there's a problem of tasa v'lo min ha'asi if you're matal tchelas in the mutelas, it's ksera? Shkoyach.
What was his kasha? That maybe he's not being loisiv, he's being mevatel.
And therefore, there's no Isser Baal Tosef.
Therefore there is.
So if there's no Baal Tosef, then you have the problem of tasa v'lo min ha'asi. Right. So and you see still that he paskin hittel lemutelas is kosher. So you arrive from Abzeir that there's no problem with tasa v'lo min ha'asi. Tosfos asks, who said it has to do with your kavana? Tosfos asks, V'amar Abzeir, no, I'm sorry, where is it? Memai de gav l'sul kavan afilu madam pek bas derven to lavim shul Tosfos v'loy boy kavana. So if you don't need kavana, so what's the tanya? His das is to be battle. Umash v'nami b'hu perkad l'bishul loy boy kavana mikamakam hacha moida de leka Baal Tosef kivan de leftulika machavan. For carrot. Here he has a fair shekavana. I'm planning to be mevatel the first set. So if I'm putting the second set on with the intention of mevatel the first set, everybody agrees that wouldn't be Baal Tosef.